We do have to wrap up, guys, and finish up with final comments.
I was just going to say, in our case, when it's not so much that we're a first-time fund. This is the first time this region has ever been done as a fund, the Indochina region, including Myanmar. So for us, it's been very useful to have anchor investors because that kind of ratifies the whole concept of doing an Indochina fund. Subject to pro forma final due diligence, the ISC will be an anchor investor in our fund, and we're putting money of our own as well. And I think that's going to make a huge difference in our fundraising efforts. So we welcome the anchor investors, the whole anchor investor approach.
We expect that the GP puts money into the
Right. The first time fund is often going to be more difficult.
Right.
John, any final comments?
Yeah, I just say that, as fundraising is a challenge, and you got to kind of put it together however you can put it together. If it's an anchor investor, it's an anchor investor. If it's using an agent, it's using an agent. If you can figure out how to do it yourself, you do it yourself. There's no right or wrong approach. It's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Very helpful, John. Thank you very much, guys. I want to thank the panel for their contribution. They'll be available during the rest of the day to answer your specific questions, and I think we need to move on to the next session. Thank you very much.
Up next, we have fund manager and team selection. So I'd like to call up Jeff Woolley as our moderator for this next session. Thank you very much, guys. Jeff?
For coming. I think we're so quiet out there, I almost need to do some kind of trick or some kind of a show to keep everybody awake today, particularly after the great lunch. I'm Chester Woolley, or Jeff Woolley. A lot of people get confused on the name, but you can call me either one as it goes. Just Chester's a big name. And I appreciate the opportunity to moderate the panel here. I think we have some, literally fantastic panel members, and maybe I'll let each one of them go through, talk about themselves a little bit, particularly since the impetus of this panel is about our backgrounds, about being venture guys. But I'm thinking we're hopefully going to be a little bit more broad than just saying, how you become a venture capitalist or et cetera, because to be honest with you, it's not nearly as cool as most of you think, I suspect. And that, how can we both be approached, particularly from entrepreneurs. I think Varun's going to basically do a little bit of speaking in that way. Also, basically, how to raise funds. I know quite a few of the fund managers are out there.
Hi, my name is David Plate. I'm the CEO of A Global. We're a global focused primarily in Southeast Asia. Spent most of our careers in Southeast Asia, focused on venture capital for infrastructure and project finance. Sweet spot tends to be 50 to 150 million. We've been very successful in hiring both locally and globally. And I think I'm very eager to hear from the rest of the panel. Other suggestions of how to expand. We're in a high growth mode at the moment, and a number of new clients we'd like to share some ideas with.
Thanks, David. My name is Simon Andrews. I'm IFC's country manager for the Mekong countries. I've been with IFC for about 14 years. We are both a limited partner and a general partner. We invest in equity in emerging markets globally for our own account, and we also manage third-party money through our asset management business. But we're also a limited partner. We have about $3 billion in about 180 private equity funds in emerging markets around the world. Many of recognize some familiar faces here today and funds that we've invested in this region. So, welcome.
Hi, my name is Varun Sood. I'm founder and managing partner of a firm called CapVent. I've had about 12 years doing this, and my experience is basically from being an entrepreneur, I tried pretty much a lot of things, including when I was in banking, age of 28, 29, 30, when I left, and then as an entrepreneur set up this business. And then I jumped straight across to being an LP. From an entrepreneur sort of deciding how people or funds should get money. It was a very funny transition, but it was part of my entrepreneurial venture. And then moved back into being a GP. So I've got three perspectives, but first and foremost, I think we're entrepreneurs and we want to, the business is entrepreneurial. We have managed as CapVent, which is a Swiss-founded firm, $1.3, $1.4 billion of private equity, invested in 110, 120 funds around the world. And now our primary function is that I run a fund which is focused on the Asian region, focusing on growth businesses in the consumer and better life kind of businesses. There's things like environment and consumer businesses that grow faster than the economy. In doing the sort of fund of funds and all, I realized that in fact the whole country doesn't grow. Certain parts of it grow. You have to break up and you figure out what will provide the growth. And it was our learning that consumer grows and things like big piles of garbage, which, if you project the GDP of India, China, Vietnam, and the piles of garbage, you end up with huge piles of garbage. So you have to overspend, and therefore there's an opportunity. So we have founded this fund, which is a $150 million fund, with one of our anchor investors is Unilever, who provides a lot of value to Unilever Corporate Ventures. We look at everything from education to consumer goods to all kinds of things, but in consumer spending. I can talk more about it later.
Great, thanks. As a background a little bit, I guess I should actually say a bit more of my background. I'm actually from the United States, probably obvious through my accent. Born in California. I came into venture at a pretty young age, about 20. Started, make a long story short, a firm called Dominion Ventures back in 1984, which is a different world in venture at that time. Dominion and I, we went through and managed a few $1 billion of cash, more in the Silicon Valley, high technology. Eventually, I formed a firm in Europe called European Venture Partners, now Krios, that has $2 or $3 billion underneath management. And then from a perspective, I started young. I noticed that a lot of people in my industry just kept on working the rest of their lives and seeing how much money they could pile up and how many entrepreneurs they could back. And I thought maybe I should at least attempt to do something else besides being a venture guy. Unlike Arun, I had not actually been an entrepreneur and an LP, etc. So I got a little bit more involved, particularly from a nonprofit basis. I did a little bit of a political stint with the Al Gore campaign during '99 as one of his vice chairs, and you probably understand how that venture turned out. So it then turned me into a basis of taking a little bit more from a social perspective, and so I joined an organization called Unitas that was been formed by mostly private equity people back in 2000, and that basically organization took a lead in what we would call the accelerating of microfinance. Unitas has about 26 microfinance banks around the world, and we have about 25 million clients that take loans from our banks around the world. That basically led into what we now have is Unitas Impact, and it is what we call impact or a social impact fund in which we concentrate on livelihoods, in which we look for, particularly for the working poor, if we can increase their, either increase their incomes or increase opportunities for them to make money, just as a common working person. So that's a whole section of now private equity called impact investing, which I don't think we're going to go over too much on this panel, but that's another aspect of the developing world. So I think it sounds like on the panel we have a good array of different people in this. Maybe before we go, I think, to some meatier subjects and just get to more personal bases, I think each one of us probably has that regular one or two appointments on our schedule monthly for informational interviews by different people who always basically say they would just like to, they're just coming out of one company or graduate schools or whatever they're doing, and they would like to kind of talk to us, which is a code to that they would like to get into venture capital or private equity. If that in that interview, let's go through each of us and basically say, what is your your recommendations for that? The top 3 things that you tell people when they come to see you. You want to? Sure.
So we've been successful in 2 areas, miserably failed at third. And the first is we've tried the recent graduates, and unfortunately we spend an enormous amount of time training them. And yes, it's very inexpensive, and we work them like dogs. And then after a few years, they go off to someone else who pays them 3 times what we do. That's failed miserably. But we have been successful picking up the ex-Deloitte, ex-KPMG, with all due respect, ex-IFC, World Bank. We've been successful in picking up particularly females after about 5 years where they've had some good experience, some exceptional training from a world-class organization. And they've kind of had that experience. And now they want to move on to something that is a little bit more entrepreneurial, as we mentioned, that does give you a little bit more of a self-motivation and a self-drive and ownership of a number of projects. That seems to be working very well. No advertisement, but there's an organization called WAHVE, WAHVE.com, which is it focuses on seniors. So anyone over the age of 55. And we've been able to hire these folks for, I should note them very cheap, but for a very low cost. And been very successful in finding someone who's already had a career and has stepped back a bit and has said, I'd like to do something different, but has this broad range of contacts and experience and to really still enjoys the industry. And so those are the two areas we've been successful in, and the one that we fell in.
Before we go to Andrew, though, you basically commented that you find a lot of females. Is that right?
I mean, we usually see ourselves as something of a catalytic investor or a first-time fund manager. We don't like to take all of the capital allocation because we do want to have a role of mobilizing capital from others. So we usually don't go beyond 20%. There are also accounting reasons why we don't do that. But we do want to bring others in alongside us. And often, in a lot of first-time fund managers, particularly in frontier markets, you do see the other development finance institutions in a lot of the smaller, more frontier markets.
So, I mean, one of the subjects that a lot of people are talking about is the opening of Burma at this point. Has anybody on the panel actually done any projects yet there, or what's the perspective?
My perspective on frontier markets, and maybe a little bit controversial, is that a lot of talk goes on about frontier markets. You have a lot of people running around frontier markets, and it can be quite dangerous to begin, not from an investment perspective, but it appears to the local people that these people are being exploitative. They're buying the crown jewels of the country, they're buying vast tracts of land, etc. And I don't think that's good business. And I think a lot of people think that let's go and see what we can get on the cheap. And that's not private equity. That's some sort of cowboy stuff going on. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that there are no valid private equity firms who are there, but I'm sure these guys are faced with 99% of other people who say, can I buy this cheap? Can I bribe the next official and get through? And that kind of, on the one hand, is upsetting because, but I think it's a necessary stage, unfortunately, that we have to go through. When you go back to the colonization of many parts of Asia, it was first come exploit the place, then you get into rural business, and then you get into something that, is completely kosher, which I hope private equity is, which is, let's have a fair arrangement between people. I think the country has to be mature to accept and understand what people are trying to do and what private equity is trying to do. And that's a very important message, actually. There are lots of entrepreneurs here also who might be a little bit confused about what we're talking about on a GPLP level. What really matters to them is how do they get money, what kind of a conversation they need to have with us. And I think Vietnam particularly is getting to a point where they can. They're advisors, they're people, they're lawyers, they tell them what's fair, what's not fair. And some of these Myanmar and frontier markets, they could, it's dangerous from many perspectives. I wouldn't do that because unless there's a proper business who understands what I'm trying to do, I don't want to be investing. And unless there's a proper entrepreneur, even here or in any country, who understands what kind of contract we're getting into, I don't want to do that. You go and buy a bank on the cheap, you know what's happened, even in Korea and Japan, it could happen over there. 10 years later, the country will come and take it back from you, and you go to court and all that kind of stuff. You don't want to get into that.
I've experienced a couple of true frontier markets, and we were in Bangladesh in 1997. But again, I think, Varun, you make a great point. We were not there in the exploitive, right? We have opportunity right now for a cobalt extraction in the DRC. It's pretty aggressive. I think we'll actually be there and we'll be directly invested. But in 1997, we were involved in a shipbreaking contract in Bangladesh, so it was not exploitative. As you say, I think it was respectful to both, the Bangladeshi countrymen who were looking for that employment. But what we brought, exactly what you're indicating is the concern that everyone has, is we brought management, we brought structure, we brought, banking facilities. We ended up creating a microfinance company while we were there. So we did try to have that humanitarian and sustainability, of which there's very little in shipbreaking, as we all know. But it was that sort of first step forward, and we felt very good about what we did, when we came, while we were there, and when we left. So I think your point's very well taken, because we have to be so cautious, because it is so easy. We had one in Colombia, and they just came in and just the concession was given to the brother-in-law. He was a timber guy. He took all of the timber and said, "Oh, I don't know anything about gold," and threw away the concession, and it had to go out and be rebid again. Well, here all the good timber is gone. So there's no value brought there. We tend to fund in under 100 days. So our projects tend to be very, very rapid to market, very rapid to fund, and then our completion time tends to be much shorter. We tend to look at a 3 to 5 year tenor. So I think we might be a little bit different model, but I think the point's very well taken.
I think there are serious guys out there. I didn't say that at all. I just meant to provoke a little bit. That 10 times the number of serious people are cowboys out there. So you got to be careful. The main problem is your counterpart ready? Does he have maturity to deal with a serious player like you?
So maybe you should be building saloons. That's what I got out of that.
Yeah, so we IFC together with
We have opened an office in Yangon, in Myanmar, together with the World Bank, and we haven't made any investments in the country yet, but we are thinking about what we do want to do, and where would private equity fit within that. Well, we have to see what is the match between where the private equity managers focus and what we want to do. I think there are 2 or 3 areas that we want to focus on. One is improving access to finance in Myanmar. It's a relatively underdeveloped market. The banking system is relatively underdeveloped. It's a market where there is microfinance, but there's a lot of opportunity to build on that. And we've seen the correlation between economic development and improving livelihoods and access to finance right across the board for corporates, SMEs, and microfinance borrowers, there's a very strong correlation between those two. The other, one of the other areas is around job creation. Again, that's going to be a very important part of the growth story in Myanmar. Is it's a large country with a large population and an opportunity to create a lot of jobs in the formal sector. And again, we've seen, in our analysis of our private equity fund managers, there's a very strong correlation between performance, i.e. private equity fund manager IRR, and the job creation in the companies that they invest in. And again, there's another very obvious strong correlation between job creation and economic development. So, that's another area that we're looking at. And then the third is around developing the country's physical and soft infrastructure as well to support that growth. Over time, if we see, we do begin to do investments there, if we see the right private equity fund managers, as I said, it's an important part of the capital market, and we would look to back the right plans.
Great. We only have about 5 minutes left, so maybe what we should do is just go around and starting with you, Varun. Perhaps you could just give us 1 or 2 minutes what you think is the most interesting thing that you're looking at or field of investing right now as being some of the smartest guys in the room here.
I think what one should look at when looking at Vietnam and other markets is really businesses that are out, that are building to sustain themselves, businesses that are not reliant on the country or the politics or the macroeconomics in some way. And how can you do that? I think you need to be choosing sectors that are at the bottom middle of the pyramid, the soft infrastructure that Simon mentioned, the education, these kind of things. These are not things that people will come back from, or fixing the garbage problems, or getting cleaner air, or things like that, where the overspending must happen. So even if Maslow's pyramid is quite clear about how things go. As soon as you have extra income, you go and put it into the quality of life that you've got. On the one hand, that's important, and people make their own choices about how they want to live, what kind of environment they want to live in. They make those choices. They're not determined by government. They're determined by the quality of the product, by the service that they're being offered, good education, these kind of things. These kind of things, I think, are the most sustainable, because otherwise we're going to be, pushed from left to right by, in real estate booms and busts and financial booms and busts, and we can't pin our careers and what we're set out to do on external factors. So at least from my perspective, we are very committed to this particular aspect of investing, and look for entrepreneurs who share our values primarily, and who can, and fund managers also, because we also have an LP business, and that's where we want to put every resource we have.
So I think private equity is a business about fundamentals. It's basically about building companies, finding the right management teams, helping them create value in their company, and turning them into world-class companies. That's what it has been about historically. It's gone in many different directions, but I think when you look at the track record of the really top fund managers, that's what they do, and they do it in up cycles and they do it in down cycles. And leverage can certainly enhance your return, but if you get it wrong, it can kill your return. And similarly, multiple expansion, if you say, well, I'm going to go in and pay 8 times earnings for this company and I'll sell it in 4 years' time at 15 times earnings, well, if you can do that within 3 or 4 years and you know that market's right, you've probably been lucky, because many get it wrong. But the people who consistently get it right are the ones who are really adding value to their companies, looking at the fundamentals, picking the right management teams. That's a rare skill in any market, in any vintage year, and growing those companies and adding value to the teams. So that would be my closing words. That's what we look for in our fund managers, and I think the evidence that we've found is that bears itself out.
I know we're tight on time. I couldn't add any more. That's exactly what we look for is that ability to understand fundamentals. You know, we're exclusively in very creative spaces, growth only. You know, we're not angels, so we're not looking for that first day. The ability to have a strong management team. We have an opportunity in Africa for the telecom currently, and we're just blown away by the depth of management, depth of leadership. You know, we're embarrassed at the number of questions we have to ask to understand their business better. That's a great position to be in. It's exactly where you want to be. So we'll be significantly invested as well as our partners. So absolutely, back to the fundamentals, appropriate, you know, level of moral and ethical standards, and you know, a good plan for the future.
Great. Yeah, I might actually add that first of all, I appreciate the Thunderbird and the whole conference, and obviously the panelists here. I mean, if you look around, and particularly at the environments of Southeast Asia and Vietnam, it seems to me that one of the biggest markets, and I see that entrepreneurs are oftentimes, in my viewpoint, overthinking, trying to compete with Silicon Valley or trying to compete with some biotechnology, in that there's a vast market, particularly of the underserved here, that if you can simply provide a good product at a fair price and basically give them good service, you would basically have a very successful business. And that's some huge advantage comparatively to a lot of developed markets where those things are being, in many ways, already done. So once again, I actually think that if you can concentrate on businesses that can do that and then scale that over a period of time, I'm really encouraging to these markets. So once again, thanks to Varun, to Andrew Simon, or Simon Andrew, and to David, and I appreciate the time.
All right, everyone, we're going to take our afternoon break, so we'll see everyone in about 15 minutes for risk management. Go out and have some coffee, stand up, stretch, and get the blood flowing, and see you in 15 minutes.
Are you enjoying the event so far?
Yes, very much.
We've had day one, which is a little bit more focused on funds, and today has been a little bit more businesses.
Yeah.
What have you seen that you've liked so far?
I think it's, diversity. This is like a PE fund conference, but at the same time, we can learn something from the regional things, like the first topic yesterday, and then there are lots of opportunities that we see. I'm from Japan, and then I think I can find lots of these opportunities are here in Southeast Asia, especially in Vietnam and China. So that would be a really eye-opening thing for me.
So you bring up the idea of Japan being very interested in the region. Do you think that that's something that's going to continue to, is that a temporary thing, or is that a permanent? Japanese are here to stay?
It's a permanent thing. It's kind of historic, the relation between Japan and then the country and China. So I think it's not a temporary thing. I definitely promise you this will be continuing.
I will hold you to that promise.
Sure.
Were there any specific panels that you liked in particular?
Well, especially the Myanmar session yesterday. Still, we don't know really much about Myanmar, but lots of these Japanese companies are rushing into Yangon and the Naked now. And then recently, one of the biggest Japanese rating houses has their contract with the Myanmar government and such kind of things. And then even the regular flight from Tokyo to Yangon would be kind of set. So I think the Myanmar potentials, as well as the Vietnamese potential, would be the next thing that we would like to find out.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
to talk briefly about currency. We're going to talk about the biggest risks that people have seen, given what they do. We're going to talk about how they've managed that risk. We're going to talk about the biggest surprises people have encountered in terms of risks they either didn't expect or risks that they expected that weren't there. And we're going to we're going to conclude with people's biggest concerns or risks that they see coming down the pipeline. I hope that will give you good flavor of kind of where everybody's coming from. And we'll just start with brief intros. My name's Todd Peterson. I'm here from New York. I've done work only in emerging markets for the past 20 years. We're lucky if we know the term frontier markets. We probably still put Singapore as an emerging market. So, what can I tell you? That's kind of how we look at this stuff. And most people in my area of the world, if they'll invest in Singapore, they'll probably invest in Pakistan. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here. So let's just go through. Let's start with Tim 1, right? And then we'll go to Chris, and then to Michael, and then to Sesto.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ninh. I'm a tax director with Ernst & Young Vietnam. I have been with Ernst & Young now for more than 10 years, advising on tax and investment issues for both local and foreign companies in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So, well, because I specialize in tax and investment issues, I hope that I can share with you some of the tax-related risks in Vietnam, so that you can have an overview of what you may expect from the Vietnam market.
Prior to that, you were in Cambodia, a couple years in Japan, and now based out of Singapore, we're covering these 6 countries. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Grimm, and I'm with Delphos International. I've spent a lot of my career in risk management, counterparty credit risk management, project management, etc. I worked, it turns out we've got quite the Japan connection here. 3 of us have actually lived and worked in Japan. I was there for 7 years. I worked for Lehman Brothers, so I've seen firsthand what can happen in a financial crisis, as well as the motor securities, where I handled a lot of operational risk issues. With Delphos International, we are primarily a project finance advisory company, and so we work in emerging markets, and when we do, we see quite a few of the risk issues in structuring the transactions. How do we put the framework together such that we can assure lenders get paid back, investors get paid back appropriately? So that's the type of work that we're doing right now. And I'll pass it over to Sesto.
Thank you, Michael. Sesto Vecchi. I'm a lawyer. I'm a managing partner of Russell & Vecchi. I've been here a couple of times. Our office operated in the 60s and 70s. We closed. I practiced in New York. I'm a New York lawyer. I practiced in New York for 10 plus years, and then we reopened our office in the early 90s, and I've been here and have been running our Vietnam practice group since the early 90s.
Well, let's start open up and then leave it open up. So, Tim, let's start with you.
Because I think that Vietnam still have quite strict, foreign exchange control regulation. So normally, if you want to put the money in, it's fairly easy, right? So you have any account in Vietnam, you can remit that overnight. That way it's simple. But then, sometimes you want to get some money back, and you go to the bank and they say, hey, we can't let you transfer the money outside unless you can show me this and that, that approval, that document, that contract. Okay. So normally, in terms of investment, what the authority would like to see is that you have a capital contribution account in Vietnam, and all of the money that you want to channel into Vietnam and outside Vietnam must be to and from that account, right? So even if your, for example, your local partner, your local shareholder would like to have a working capital immediately, you have to refrain from that by asking them to properly carry out all the procedures, so that you can officially inject the money and later on you will be able to get it out. Okay, we have seen a lot of occasions whereby foreign funds or even foreign individuals investors put the money into the personal bank account of a friend of a friend, of his wife, his girlfriend. Okay, and a few years later, the business grow up, and then the Vietnamese partner say, "Hey, I'm sorry, but that business is mine." And then there's even if they want to return the original investment to overseas, there's no mechanism for them to do that. Okay, and then even if you get the money inside Vietnam, every time you left Vietnam, you can get only $5,000 together with you, right? So I would say that in terms of money remittance inside and outside Vietnam, there's still a lot of regulation, and sometimes it's not that clear. So it's better if you do, the usual cautious way, asking your advisor, "Hey, I want to remit the money. So what are the procedures that I have to follow? And then, later on, how can I get that back?" Okay. So normally that's the advice. And if you haven't done it properly, there may be some way to solve it. But as Doc mentioned earlier, it may take a couple of years. It may cost you a lot of money.
Looking around the region outside Vietnam, I think our experience is that it really depends a lot on which market you're talking about as to whether cash can be a bit of a problem, forex can be a problem. Typically getting out is the bigger issue than getting it in. And in this regard, we rely heavily, we advise heavily on double tax agreements, DTAs with between various countries. Singapore has